all I had to do was hit the transition button there so that you could see our lovely faces. But we are live on the Dev Talk Show here on July 28th of 2021. Co-hosts are, let's see, what do you think? I'll point the right way? Co-hosts are right over there. We got Andy Schwam and Rich Ross. You know, it's harder than it looks, I think, to remember the left and right. I guess it comes with practice.
Right. The old stage left, stage right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
Well,
I don't know why it's so hard.
I know.
It's hard.
But even just now, I wanted to point right at you two, and I was like, wait a second. If I do this, it's going to go the other way.
Where do we point when we say, like, oh, you know, if you're watching on YouTube, like, smash that like button.
Yeah,
like,
smash the like button.
I don't even know if I'm doing that right. And plus, I don't know if my hands are on screen because we cropped so I don't know if it's the whole thing's a mess. Right?
Yeah. It's kind of narrow. Heads are kind of big. But it is a Dev Talk show. Try Goofy thinks it's a bot show. But I assure you we are live. And we're going to talk about some fun stuff that we've, both of us have been working, or both of you have been working with. Blah. Easy for me to say.
That's where I let you start.
Yeah.
Yeah, how's life in general for you guys? Everything good?
Yeah. Summer a month ago, right?
That's it.
If you measure summer by the kids being in school, which kind of is one way to do it. So
that's how we do it here in the States.
Yeah.
It does seem to be the factor, doesn't
it? Right. So no, I mean, another month to go. My daughter said it occurred to her that it was winding down. She said, summer's almost over. I said, yeah.
What? No, it's not.
It's only about 4 weeks.
Not even August. You cannot say summer's winding down. That's like depressing. That's like saying, well, Christmas it's Christmas season. Like, you might as well say that then. Like, summer is not winding down.
How much
I haven't
time?
Even gone on vacation yet.
How much time left do you have for your Christmas shopping?
Well, Hanukkah comes early sometimes, by the way. So it's more complicated than that. It is more complicated. But, oh, man, summer's great. I mean, let's not cut that short. Let's enjoy summer and, enjoy our days and our vacations. And hopefully everybody has vacations. Wherever you are in the world, hope things are good. Hope that things are returning to normal where you are. There are less and less places where things are, I don't know, I'm using that word normal. As I was saying, I hope things are returning to normal where you are. Well, some people where they are still really dealing with COVID. And some people where they are dealing with forest fires. And some people where they are dealing with drought. And some people where they are dealing with, like, what is normal is just hopefully uneventful, right? And here's to an uneventful day.
Yeah.
That's what I look forward to, right? None of that stuff. Oh, try Goofy's ready for ski season. Well, that doesn't count to me. Like, we could talk, I don't want to jump into, the Christmas season, but skiing any day. It's always ski season if that's possible. Oh man, do you guys ski?
I don't. I tried it once a long time ago.
Yeah, not since I was in high school. So
yeah.
Skiing is great.
I think it would be great. Just picked other things to do, but I do think it would be great. It's not like I didn't live somewhere where I wouldn't have been exposed. I mean, Big Bear was an hour away in Southern California, but spent more time on hockey rinks and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. What else we got going on? Try Goofy is saying, would love to be in South America. I'm with them on that. Her, him, I forget. I don't know who Try Goofy is. Chops has got a little not an announcement, but something to talk about there, right?
Yeah, my daughter played Flight Simulator on Xbox yesterday. It's the first time that she's tried it. I mean, I was playing it last year, and she wanted to, She wanted to fly from just a little general aviation airport down the road out to like Hershey, and so we tried to find it. It was cool. That was fun.
Does that mean I'm curious because we've talked about flight simulator. I know it's something you're really into. From a PC perspective, it's pretty weighty, I guess is the word, right? So if you have an Xbox, I would assume that if it is launched on the Xbox supports it. Are there levels to that? Do you know much about that?
Yeah, so the Xbox Series X and Xbox Series S can play Flight Simulator. The Series S plays it at a 1080p, and the Xbox Series X will play it at 4K. I believe both of them will use HDR, the expanded color range, and it's pretty impressive how good it looks. My computer, is pretty. In fact, I built this computer to play Flight Simulator, but I gotta say I didn't go all out. I could have spent as much as you want, right? You can spend anything you want, and I'm seeing, I'm pulling sometimes 45 frames a second or something, which in a flight simulator is not as important as an action game, but it's locked at 30 frames a second on a Series X. They did a lot of work over the last year to improve performance, and the PC gamers benefited from that too.
Cool.
So I did notice from day to day, I kind of took a little metric of my own, kind of pulling about 35 frames a second flying over LAX, which is pretty populated and so on. And then it launched, and there was a big update for PC, and I went up to about 45 frames a second. So apparently we benefited from the performance improvements. And yeah, like Chop says, never thought you would play a full-fledged flight sim on a Xbox, on a console. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I'm just curious. Do you know the cost? Because I'm interested in getting it now that it's available on Xbox. I would like to get it for me and Penny or whatever.
Probably the best way to get it is to subscribe to Game Pass. It's on Xbox Game Pass. You can get Game Pass $1 for the first 3 months, and then if you're already paying for Xbox Live, then Game Pass Ultimate's a pretty good deal because it's be like $5 more. That's probably the best way to get it. And then you get 400 other games. So Game Pass is an amazing, amazing deal. Yeah, the PC version is in Game Pass. That's true. Yep. Yeah, there are flight controllers for the Xbox. I don't have any. The Xbox controller has been perfectly fine for me, but I do know that there are flight controllers for PC and Xbox. I just don't. I've never tried one. I don't know anything about it, but people use them. So
interesting. I'd be excited to check it out. Hey, be kind of neat. Be kind of neat to try that out.
But tonight we're gonna talk about static site generators, right? How would we describe that? Static sites are when you just have a website with files, HTML, CSS, maybe some JavaScript, and you don't have maybe some server doing some rendering. That could be a framework like it could be like a Django or a ASP.NET MVC or the like. Express had a framework that it used to be called, I think, Jade, and now I think it's called Pug. I forget. There was a name change for a good reason. But this isn't the same thing. This is a static site generator. So I'm going to put both of you on the spot because this is totally unfair. Like, in your own words, what do you think is great about using a static site generator?
Well, from the one that I've been playing around with, I think it's more of a I can focus on some of the templates, some of the layouts, and the foundational pieces, and just basically have a little bit of content that goes into whatever the makeup of the page is, and behind the scenes, all of that will get generated for me when I do a check-in. And we'll see when we get to the one that I'm going to show. I'm actually using GitHub as a place to store the content of the site that we're building out. So it's something that's kind of natural because you're used to downloading the files for a project, download the files for your website. In this case, make your changes, commit, pushing back up, and it just gets generated once the commit happens. So it's pretty cool that way.
Yeah.
What I think about with stuff like this, especially when you talk about like a blog, or well, I guess for a lot of different things, maybe static site generator, but let's just imagine we have a blog. So if I write a blog post, I'm making up this imaginary blog engine that we might be running, but maybe it's got like a SQL server behind it, or it could be Azure SQL or something like that. And the content of my blog, the article that I wrote, is probably going into like a row in the database or something like that, right? And so when you ask for that page, when you say, oh, I want to see Shwami's great article on static site generators, whatever, right? You go to that URL, the site is going to render the blog, and then it's got to go into the database. Well, I mean, it doesn't really do it in that order, but it's going to go into the database, and it's going to get that content out, right? And it's going to put the HTML in with the rest of the HTML on the page, and render it, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about that from a static content, like my blog post isn't changing between now and ever, from when I wrote it. And so why should we waste all that time with rendering and fetching it out of the database when it is just sort of static? Like the content is static. Now it gets a little different when you start talking about comments and things like that. But let's just stick with the simple example here.
Right.
And so to me, it's performance, right? Not that maybe the old performance was so slow. But it seems like, well, this is going to be really fast, first of all. And then the other thing that goes along with that is often hosting price, because static content, it's just simpler. There's no engine. It's just static content. It's just HTML, CSS. And static doesn't have to mean it doesn't ever have any functionality into it, because it can have JavaScript. But it just means that there's not something like the .NET framework running behind it or something like that.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it.
Yeah,
we looked at a couple. Yeah. We looked at a couple of static site options in the past, right? We did that site on using blob storage in Azure and just having the pages there and running those up in a website in Azure. So we've seen some of these before. It's just different models of doing it.
Yeah, static content, and if you're joining us and some of these terms are a little, like, what do you guys keep talking about static content? It's just files instead of having any processing go on. It's cheap to store, cheap to host. If your content doesn't change very much or very often, a blog's a great example. Could be some documentation for a team. And if I can, date myself a little bit, like this was the early days of the web, using something like GeoCities and in Notepad, writing HTML and maybe even writing some CSS, and you would actually go update it. Well, the thing about it is that's kind of tedious, right? Especially if the layout of the page is the same page after page after page. So I feel like what we're going to see tonight is what you use to write the articles and write the text and the content is so much simpler that you just get to focus on the words.
Right.
So that's going to be cool to see. Yeah. And I think what's really neat is, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, is we won't only just see how cool it is to use, but some great features for deployment, hosting that are quick, they're free. You can get started tonight after the show. Even documenting a project you're working on without doing any work, just boom, point it at something and it does a bunch of reference docs for you. Maybe that's what we'll see. So,
yeah.
What do you think?
I think, you might be surprised.
Yeah. So I think we have Rich's screen up right now, right?
We might all be surprised.
Yeah, we might be surprised. I know for sure, though. I think we do have Rich's screen up, right?
Do we?
Well,
I'm not sure.
Not on the. I'm sorry.
Sharing that.
There's somebody's screen up, or it's the freeze from the last time. Because here's the thing about sharing is it just when somebody quits sharing, I just get the last page and that's it. Yeah. So the question here is who's going to start us off, and I'll switch us over.
think Rich putting you on a spot, but I think you were going to start it off, right?
Doesn't matter. I can go first.
All right. Well, while that's getting back up there, Try Goofy's been joining in saying, hey, you get things like CDN support. So in a lot of those cases, you're not even hosting anymore. Your content delivery network has got it all over the world in places hopefully close to where the users are. And, he was talking about one of the very popular generators, Hugo. Let's go ahead and bring this comment up, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the Hugo templates had a basic find feature built into the table contents. It was pretty nice. So yeah, that's cool. It doesn't necessarily just have to be words on a page. So let me switch here. Is this what we're expecting? Oh no. Oh, it's doing that again. Okay.
Hey, I'm in here. Let me out. There we go.
Let's see. Hold on. I think I can. Last time that went away. Okay. Look at that.
Oh, we went to Skype bubbles again. You like to call
so
them? They're back.
You know what's really interesting about that? And I think maybe there's something now. Watch this. So if I minimize my Skype window, no, you stay. Huh. We had a problem before the show where those cool looking Skype bubbles were showing up for us, and I had a theory about what they were, but clearly I was wrong. Now let me see if I'm right here. I'm going to try something else. Oh, bubbles! Ta-da! Okay. I see what it is.
You're seeing stuff we don't. Oh, there's the bubbles.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing it on a delay.
So
I'm seeing it on me.
This is really strange, but now if you want to know what it is, it's if I minimize the window, then and your faces go away from the view, then it turns into those bubbles. Yeah, the great thing about using Skype is we can share each other's screens and faces pretty seamlessly, and it's not easy to do with other software, mainly because of NDI. NDI support is what makes it happen. NDI is how I share my daughter's playing Xbox downstairs over my stream. I switch between her view and my view. So NDI is cool, and Skype has built-in NDI support, and that's pretty cool.
So, Rich, are you sharing?
Yeah.
Right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we are looking at a GitHub repository.
Yeah, I know. Go figure, right?
Yeah.
So when we think about hosting and static site generators, one of the possibilities is, and I'll bring it up here just to show it off, is that you can actually use GitHub and create your own static site using GitHub Pages. And what we're going to do is talk a little bit about setup. Some of it we've already done because we've wired up some things behind the scenes to make this look a little better. But some of it we'll kick in from scratch and focus on one of the static generation engines called Jekyll. But just basically, we can have so this is. Can
I interrupt for a second?
Of course.
I'm not seeing it on the stream, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not seeing Chris. The scene isn't set or something.
Okay. That should be it now. That was my mistake.
Right. That's what I was trying to say before. I'm not seeing it. I don't think you were hearing me. I was like, I'm not seeing it. Hello, help.
All right. So Rich, take two. Sorry about that, Rich. That was my mistake there.
It's all good. So what we have here is this is just GitHub Pages, and it is a free version or a free way of essentially hosting your website for inside of GitHub. And it could be something like we're doing here, which is taking our Dev Talk Show repository and putting essentially a static site over top of it just to show what this all looks like. Although there we go. But it could be that you have part of the content for your project is, let's say it's a docs folder that includes information that you want to have about your project in a static web page kind of way. And you can also do that with this as well. We're just going down this path because it's something I've got a little bit of experience in, and we've got a static repository here that we can kind of pull some links together and make it work. To get this set up, what we've done is we go into our settings page inside of GitHub, and important thing is the name of this one. When we're creating a web page that is for, or a static page that's for the overall account. Got to have it in, I could try, let's see, how's that? We have to have it in this kind of a format, right? So the account name.github.io, that's essentially the name of the repository. And then down here in the pages section, you can see we've already got this pre-published, but we have the ability to pick and choose what is the source for the content here. So we could say, whenever we check back into the main branch, we could, this site will get rebuilt. If we have a root folder, or in this case, a docs folder, we could say, that's where you're going to find the content for your site. So eventually, we're going to go ahead and make a docs folder so that we can host our content in here, and that gives us some room that if we have one of those project sites, you can have a separate folder for source and all of the other things you might have in your project, but keep your docs content kind of segregated out there. Just from the site here, or from the GitHub Pages environment, we can choose a theme. So we could go out to see them, about a half dozen or so themes that are out there and possible to include on your site. So you can see they have a bunch of them listed up here, and it'll show you very quickly, if you drill into it, what your site might look like with that theme. So we go back. And you see here, we've already, because we've done this a little bit ahead of time, we actually have a short URL that eventually show the content of our, or a vanity URL that will show the content of our site once we go ahead and get this created. All right. Any questions so far? I'm going to do a little bit of Git cloning here while.
Yeah. So what's interesting is we talked about static site generators, and then the first thing we did was we went to GitHub. So GitHub has a feature called GitHub Pages, which I have used in the past to teach people about web development by telling them, if you turn on GitHub Pages and you do nothing more than just drop an index HTML in there, it serves up a website. Mm-hmm. You go to, in your case, this is an organization on GitHub called the Dev Talk Show. That's our official organization, right? And then the devtalkshow.github.io is the name of your repo. And there's a little convention in GitHub Pages that if you name it that way, then without doing anything else, they will just surface static files that you put in here, whether it's an index HTML, some CSS, some JavaScript, whatever. And I've used this. We've even had shows on this, where this is one of my favorite ways to teach people web development, because you could theoretically start in here. Theoretically, is it the best development environment? No. But I think for a lot of people, what's exciting is seeing like something they built in a browser, like it feels real. So what you're doing, though, is you're saying that GitHub has this Jekyll static site generator built in, and you're just going to use it.
Yep. So if we go into, I think it's Pages Help. So you can see everything we kind of went through here is all listed inside the GitHub documentation. So you can see, talks about pages, how to go ahead and create pages, add a theme, configure your publishing source, what branch, what folder you're pulling from. All of that we just kind of talked through is all listed inside of here. But then down here we have setting up a site with Jekyll, right? So, and you can bring whatever static site generator you want. Jekyll's the one that automatically, or kind of has that relationship with GitHub Pages. There are others, like Hugo's the one that I've had some colleagues of mine use, and have some good comments around using that with GitHub Pages too. But there's a number of them out there. It's just a matter of wiring it up so that what you want to have and what we don't have by just going into our repository here and modifying pages is we don't have a way to see what the final output is until I go ahead and do a check-in and push my content back up into GitHub. And because of that, if you think about, I know when I do edits, it's like I make an edit, I do it, and I push, like, oh, I forgot the period. And I'm constantly doing a push and taking a look at it. And there are limits, and they're listed in the help area. There are limits to how many times you can actually do a push, because it's going through its own churning and site generation behind the scenes every time you do a check-in. So there are limits how many check-ins you can actually do in an hour. So because of that, it makes sense to do something with a static rendering engine like Jekyll, but have it run locally on your machine here.
Yeah.
So if we go to this, so this is, and there are links again to this from the documentation. This is the Jekyll site. This is where you can go ahead and get started. I think if I go to the docs, and we can look at Quick Start, and we can look at installing all the prerequisites, and you can see it's based on Ruby and uses Ruby gems. And so let's see, here are installation instructions based on your operating system. I'm going to go to Windows, and we can do all of this by installing Ruby and installing Jekyll. And I'm kind of, I don't know how about you guys, but I don't know, I kind of see this at the beginning, not officially supported on the Windows platform. And I kind of feel, well, maybe I shouldn't install these things on my environment. I don't know if you guys would have the same kind of concern or warning.
I think we're probably 3 years out when I did follow the instructions and everything worked fine. That said,
okay,
there is a different reason that I think you're getting to of why I wouldn't install a bunch of stuff, and it's got nothing to do with supported, not supported, whatever. It's just
right.
Here we go.
This is cool. Yeah, this is cool. So what happened was when I saw that, I figured, all right, let's go ahead and do a little bit of searching. And what I was searching for was, how can I run, because Jekyll wants to run on some kind of a Linux distribution, how can I run Jekyll in a container? Because you'll see in a second, the next step is, well, I can just do all of my programming inside of a container using Visual Studio Code. And there's a great blog post out here by Carlos Mendable, and he has basically all of the instructions you're going to need to do this. So he has what's really cool here around our dev-container.json file. So this will tell anybody else who comes along and downloads that repository what information it needs to make to access this repository through a container. And we did a show on GitHub Codespaces, gosh, a year ago almost,
probably a little,
maybe 9 months ago.
Yeah, I think we're live.
Yeah. What I think we were here.
Well, we were together.
We were all
right.
remote.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Because I think I think we've done a show where we've used GitHub Codespaces where we were all at the Malvern MTC. But then I think we've done another similar show.
Yeah, and that was, I guess, the naming changes, right? Because that was Visual Studio Codespaces first.
Yes,
and then
that's
GitHub
right.
One is the one that we wound
That's
up
right.
doing.
It probably was Visual Studio
Codespaces.
Codespaces, because the first time I saw Codespaces, I said, okay, I want in.
Right. Yeah, I think we all thought that, definitely. Yeah. But this is kind of giving that same flavor. So what I'm going to do, so realize that I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but we're going to get Jekyll running inside of a container and then make our edits and then be able to push that up to the Azure environment. So here I've got my repository that I brought down for shows. If I go into my shows directory and I hit code, yep, I trust them because they're me. You can see here that we have our code repository, and I will see if I can do this a little bit more. There we go. Make it a little bigger so you guys can see the screen there. So I have, essentially, we're in our folder for shows. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a file. I'm going to call it dev-container.json. I could spell. Okay. And I'm going to go back to that blog post and just basically copy the contents of that dev container object. Okay. So I'm going to save that. That now gives me essentially the definition around what it is that we're going to look for when we want to remote into this container. The other thing I need is, and I think I also need to, although I did that, JSON does not like comments. So let's get rid of all those. Save. And then let's come over here. Let's create another file in the root. And this file is going to be called Docker file. Yeah, sure, why not? Although I should probably Docker. Yep, make sure that's running. Otherwise, this will be a really short trick. And then all I'm going to do is come back into this and grab all of the content we have from here. So you see he's getting the latest Debian image. And then he actually has sections in there where he's got install Ruby, install Jekyll, and put all the pieces that he needs in here to get this running. Yep, that's fine. What? Oh, that's lovely. Hang on, we may be coming to you and splitting this out. Let's see how this goes. I've got my Docker file. Let's get rid of the extension. Paste it in. Cool. Let's save this. And then I guess.
Well, it's the joys of being live, right? That's how it always is.
Right. Obviously, I clicked go and I didn't see, yeah, go ahead and install it. So while that's happening, though, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder.
Here, Rich.
What's that?
You said something went wrong. And so I don't do Docker, and I'm trying to figure out what you said something went wrong, or I don't see anything that seems wrong. And Chris, well, you click go. I don't know what happened.
So I hit go to launch Docker, and Docker. I must have also hit. There's an update. Do you want to install it? I must have said yes in my haste to get Docker up and running.
Oh, okay. Docker itself is like a new version or something like that. Okay.
Exactly. See, we're still unpacking files.
Not normally. So, keep in mind, not everyone watching here, and I'm one of them, is familiar with Docker. So this isn't part of really what you're doing. This is like, all of a sudden the framework is getting an update or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the underlying desktop environment. The idea is, you're right. You don't need to do this to do the static web content. What I'm showing is, because I don't want to install all of these things on my machine, and I want to run everything in a container, this is one of the things that has to be put in place, essentially.
Now, another option is that dev container JSON file works, and the Docker file. That works on GitHub Codespaces, right?
Yes. Yeah, so if you were up in GitHub, once we check this back in, and if the Dev Talk Show account had access to Codespaces,
right, then
you could basically run it. But on the other hand, doing all of this and setting this up, anybody who had a version of Docker running on their machine could download the repository and immediately get started. They don't have to install Jekyll and do all the setup.
Right. There's also Visual Studio Code also has SSH support, so you could go directly to another machine. It also has the remote container support, which is what you're activating here, right? It just, the mistake is accidentally updating instead of saying do it later. So let's talk about what these files look like, right? I don't know if we've said it too loud. Like, while this thing is working, have we talked about Markdown?
Nope, I don't think we have. I think it's go right now because we haven't seen any content yet, right? And I know that we're getting a little delayed here with this thing, but Chris, it's a good idea. Let's what can you build here? What can you do?
Yeah, so
catch up, right? This will catch up behind the scenes, and we'll be ready for this next thing later.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have an example file just to show what it looks like, because the question is, why are we talking about yet another markup type language, right? We already have HTML. We're building static sites. Well, do you really, is that, if you just want to focus on writing content and you open, I don't care what it is, your favorite text editor, your favorite word processor, what's cool about those environments is you just start typing. You just go to work. If you're writing a book or a memo or a page or whatever, you just start typing the words. You don't sit around going okay, open this tag, close this tag. And
Right.
and I feel like Markdown is an attempt to get us closer to that, but yet be very convertible to HTML almost with no thinking. I mean, the Markdown concepts map to HTML, right?
Yes. Yeah. And they do. They get, and the engines will certainly translate that. You could create the HTML if you want, and for some of the pages that we have in here, when we think about layouts, we actually do some of that. But and probably would be easiest to do Markdown.
There is a great site that I used to look at for Markdown language. I wonder which one's going to come up.
Markdown guide.
I don't think it's the same one, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's fine. But
yeah,
there's a cheat sheet to show some of the formatting you can do, and you might see this if you go back into, if we're here and we added a README, right? These are the things that we could go ahead and just basically drop into this and say, well, this is
your README. When you create a GitHub site, it's really common to have readme.md, like it's almost a standard, and they'll render that for you.
Rich, I'm just going to suggest if you zoom in a bit. Yeah, thanks. It'll be helpful to everybody.
Yep, have to do it on every page.
So all you got to do is type a couple things there, and you're going to get that heading, and you're going to get some text, and it's just done.
Yeah, do something like this.
You can even preview, can't you? Without even committing.
There you go.
Look at that. So that's Markdown being rendered for you by GitHub. Instead of you typing out tags and so on, you just now have some quick syntax. It's quick on the fingers. Pretty easy to remember. I find myself remembering more, and you can just mix in if you want to. Yep, that's a good demo. Although there is the two, well, whatever, who cares? You can mix in, you can just start mixing in HTML and it works, doesn't it? Yep. Or there's
text is a little different. It's hard to see, but
there's the shorthand for that, which is 2 asterisks surrounding text.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. But see, that's what's cool though, is, if Markdown,
you might know some of.
Yeah, you might know a little bit of each, or maybe Markdown just isn't quite doing exactly what you want. I know that this particular font they're using at GitHub doesn't look too. Maybe do italics instead. That should be more obvious, which is 1 asterisk. Should be. I think it'll be easier to tell. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Nice. So this is the kind of syntax that you can use to get a formatted page with or without knowing HTML, and then use that as your static page that the engine essentially will render for us.
Yeah. And like, hold on. Lost what I was working on here. What I was looking for was this view of mine. So like Try Goofy says, Slack and Discord support basic Markdown. And I find myself typing that in. If you go back far enough, there were forums that had like their own type of language, and there were competing ones. This is going back a ways. Thinking about when on the web we would go to forums. I feel like they still exist, but they're not quite what they once were. But here you've got this universal guide, Markdown, and look, headings, bold, italic.
Tables.
Yeah, you can create links pretty quickly. Include images pretty easily.
Yeah, as long as they're, if they could be a URL, or they could be sitting somewhere in your repository, like in an assets folder.
Yep.
So you can bring those in as well. Nice.
Yeah, it's funny. It's becoming another markup language that I find myself learning, just because I've really appreciated it as a way to produce documents that, especially for other developers on a team, they can consume it, they can contribute to it just by updating a GitHub repo that I might, or a Git repo. It doesn't have to be Git, it could be whatever, that we all have access to. And And I feel like that can encourage collaboration in a way where if I built a website to do it, they might be like, I don't feel like doing web development today. just to add my 2 cents about our product or what we're working on. So yeah, I can't wait to see Markdown used here. Jekyll uses Markdown then.
It does, but they're also it obviously can also take HTML too. So that is what we'll show a little bit of.
Okay.
So I believe my Docker is up and running.
Okay.
It's available. Okay.
Don't click update again.
No. Although it still says engine starting.
So there is a Visual Studio Code extension that you're using here, or a set of extensions. I think it's one of those icons up there represents it. Is it the one underneath the debug? Is the remote? You've got Run and Debug. Yeah, Remote Explorer. There's a suite, an extension suite that gets you a bunch of stuff, right? It gets you SSH support. It gets you. I don't know if you have that suite installed. Yeah.
I don't believe I did. No.
Okay. No problem. Let me see if I can find it because people might be interested. I'll get this kind of stuff into the comments here.
So, I mean, it's definitely, I'm just going to throw in, my comment here, not to poo-poo on this topic and stuff like that, but there's a little bit of a learning curve here if you're not a Docker user, is one of the things, right? Because even though, I think I've done Docker at a couple of demos, right? I've done a little bit of containers. So, the idea of like running this in a container, to me, I hear a lot of people talk about the benefits of running certain things in a container. Oh, you don't need to install this or that, and that sounds pretty cool. But on the other hand, we'll show some alternatives too, right? And I think we were going to talk about a couple. And Try Goofy mentioned in the comments, I think what Try Goofy is saying is with something like Hugo, which I've never used. It's a self-contained exe, right? You just sort of drop it in, and I think it works.
Yep.
Right.
So there are a lot of alternatives. And I think, this conversation is a lot about the concept that we can have static sites, and there's a bunch of different frameworks to use and to try, which probably each have advantages and disadvantages, right? And maybe Jekyll is really great, and maybe it's worth a little extra time of doing some extra things. Maybe it's not. That's not really my point. It's kind of like when we talk about unit testing, and someone says, well, X unit's better than N unit, and blah, blah, blah. Whatever you're using. MS test is better than both of them. Whatever your feeling is.
Right.
Well, what I always say is just use one of them. That's the important thing, is that you're using one of them, right? And I think we could probably make a similar statement on some of these libraries that help do static site. I'm sure there's some feature differences too. We don't know that, but there's a cool concept here that one way or another, whichever framework you're using and choosing to set them up, static site generation with Markdown is generally like an easy way to build content, and I just think it's generally a fast way to do things, and I just kind of wanted to point that out because I don't know if everyone who's watching is as familiar with some of these things, like I am. Like I'm sort of being the voice of the newbie when it comes to containers here, right? I just kind of, but I do think, like, let's not get caught up in the containers part of it, because there's a lot of goodness happening in the static site generation stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So why don't I do this? Because I know it's going to take a little bit to run. I'm just going to show real quick how we're going to connect the container. And then why don't we switch over to Andy, what you have, and then we'll come back and show the pages through this one when we're done.
Yeah, cool.
All right, let's do this. So we're going to reopen our project in a container, right? So the folder that we're sitting in, it's basically just going to get all wrapped up, pushed into a container that we defined in the Docker file, and we're going to go ahead and let that run. We're going to do that from refer to the existing Docker file in the container configuration. Yep. And we can see the log. It's going to take a few minutes. So if you've not done containers, it's got to go in this image that it's getting here. The Debian latest has a whole bunch of different layers that are that it's probably built off of, and it's gonna have to pull all of those down, which is going to take some time, and kind of run through all of those. So maybe this is a good point, given kind of how far we are into this. Andy, if you want to talk a little bit about your site generator, and we can come back and show what things look like on this end.
Yeah, sure. I can do that. Let me just drag a few windows away, and I'm going to pull this over here. And if you're ready, Chris, I will share my screen.
I will stop sharing.
Yeah, and let me see. Click this, click that. What am I doing here? In Skype, when I go to share my screen, I'm always dangerously close to hitting that hang up button for some reason. I don't know why. I always want. I'm like, don't do that. Okay, so I'm sharing now. I don't know if it's up on the scene up yet.
Yeah, we see it. It should be showing up.
So I wanted to talk about DocFX. Now, DocFX is a little different than a static site generator. This is geared specifically to static documentation generation, as you can see, in the text here, static documentation, right? So as developers, we build a lot of documentations. Don't get me wrong, I think the tool Rich was using great for generating documentation as well, but I think some of those tools are also, geared toward just other static content. I don't know if I'm 100% right about that. But DocFX is based on, creating developer documentation, right? Not even just documentation, but really, geared towards developer documentation. I don't know all the background of it. I think it's changed over the years a bit. But one of the things that DocFX does is, there's two aspects to it. One is, as you can see here in the description here, generate static sites from Markdown. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And that's going to be similar to what
again.
Rich was talking about. But what I think separates DocFX and probably others that I don't know, that I'm not that familiar with, is this. Generate static sites from code files. Okay. So, and we'll talk about what that means, but DocFX can produce documentation from source code, including C#, F#, VB, REST, JavaScript, Java, Python, and TypeScript, as well as raw Markdown files, right? So yes. Now, I've never tried any of these except C# and Markdown, but it works pretty well with C#. And so one of the examples we'll talk about here, a lot of people these days are used to thinking about Swagger, right? You generate an API, and with a couple of, like, the addition of a library, and right now that stuff's really built into the .NET Core, I think, and ASP.NET Core in particular for like an API, is that like you sort of for free get this generated documentation over your API. Oh, okay, there's a get and there's a post and there's a couple of methods and things like that, right? Well, DocFX was doing this. Actually, it's been around a pretty long time, I think. Long time in terms of development. Like, this is not brand new. This has been around certainly for a few years. And so the idea here, if I look at a code sample here, and this is a really bad code sample here, but I've got a public class here over here in Visual Studio, right? And maybe there's a method on it. Let's just say public, void do something, right? Again, not super exciting, but we'll talk more about it. So we'll dig into this a little bit. But what I want to do is, wouldn't it be great if I could generate some documentation on this library that I'm going to compile, right? I'm going to compile this library, and it's going to have 50 classes when it's done. And there's going to be, each class has a bunch of methods. And, Chris, you're saying, oh wow, I really want to use Andy's library. I want to import it. I'm gonna bring it down. But what does the do something method do? Like, what are the overloads of it? And of course, you could come in and look at the code. But wouldn't it be nice if we had some sort of documentation about the the file, the classes, and the methods and stuff, much like we've always done over the years when we would say, well, I wonder how this method in the .NET framework works or something like that. We would go to the .NET documentation, right? And we would take a look at some of that stuff. So let's focus on that at first, and then we'll talk a little bit about what more it can do. But so I'm going to go over to this thing, and there's a bunch of different ways you can do this. The simplest way, I think, for demo purposes is to go over to our good friend, the NuGet package manager, and browse over to docfx. Now I'm doing this in Visual Studio. VS Code works great for this kind of stuff, right? I actually usually use VS Code for a lot of this kind of stuff, but I was trying to take a look at it this way. So docfx console is the package you want to include. To me, anytime I come in here, whether it's docfx or entity framework and stuff I'm always like, well, which one is the one? Like, there's always a lot. This one only has 2 listed right here, but sometimes you have a lot of choices, and you're always like, which one? Console is the one. Remember, it's got the 1.38 million downloads as opposed to the other one. So, all right, let's get this installed. This will go quick. Okay, and I'll accept that. All right. So that should be getting done. And so what's going to happen is it doesn't, well, let's see, is it doing anything yet? I don't think it's going to do anything yet until I hit the magic build command. And when I build solution, of course, the build's going to start. It's a pretty small project, so it should build relatively quickly. I'd be disappointed if it doesn't, although anytime I'm running Skype, things do tend to slow down a little bit. But look what magically is happening over here in the Solution Explorer.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this. What's going on here? Okay. So when I built it, it started to put some stuff in here. Now, I will say, I want to address this because it's kind of bothering me that it's like right in here with my class 1 thing. Right now, normally class 1 would be in some other folder as well, but I don't know if I like this all being up at the root. And I know that in other projects, there are ways to move that into like a different folder or a different space, so it's maybe not clogging up your project file and sort of littering up. But let's not worry too much about that just yet. So some things are still happening, right? And something else just happened, and we got this new site folder. I think was the last one that popped in. So one of the first thing we got to talk about is this docfx JSON file, which really this is all the settings for docfx, right? It does a whole bunch of stuff out of the box. It tells it wants to look at this. My project is called the TDS docfx demo, so it's going to generate code for this project, right? You can add multiple projects to this. You can do a lot of kind of stuff. And then there's a bunch of like things that content I want to include. We'll come back to talk about some of that and other settings in here. But really out of the box, we're kind of good to go here. So what happened now is that it also created some folders up here. Articles, and we're going to come back to this a little bit, but articles is where we talked about that it's going to generate docs on my code, okay? But what if I don't want it to generate, well, what if I also want to include what they call an article? I want to write a few paragraphs of content. Why would you use this project, or what is this best for, or whatever kind of content I want to have. Ooh, just got some double back in my head there. So if I look at the intro markdown file, and I'm seeing it on both sides. All it has right now is this simple label here. Add your introductions here. So, I could come in here and put markdown and like, hello world, right? And on the right, it's just showing me a preview of that. I think I can turn that off if I want, but it doesn't really matter. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that just now, but I can create articles, and TOC stands for table of contents. So it's a way to build menus and things like that in it. In the API section, there's some additional stuff in here, but I think at this point I need to care about this. The last thing it created was this underscore site. And if I look at this, it might look sort of similar, right? Like here we have this article called Intro Markdown. But if I look up here under the site and I look at articles, I see, oh, intro.html. It took the markdown and it turned it into HTML, which we can look at here in, excuse me, in Visual Studio. But there's a lot in here, right? This doesn't just say, well, I mean, I added to the intro. I didn't even build it, but the intro markdown was pretty much empty when I came in here, right? It just had that one thing that said add your introductions here, right? This thing has a whole bunch of stuff, and look at this. H1, add your introductions here, right? It's an H1 because over here in Markdown, we had a pound space, right? That gives you an H1. And you would think, well, why all that other stuff? Well, remember what we were talking about earlier here. This is static site. It combined a whole bunch of stuff and said, I'll give you a whole page out of that, right? And navigation at the top. Now, where does that all come from? Well, that's the DocFX sort of framework and templates that it says, I'm going to build out this stuff a little further, right? And if I look in the API up here, we'll see that it created some stuff in here as well. And of course, my class wasn't really named anything special, class1.cs, but what do we see up here? TDS DocFX demo class1.html.
Nice.
And if we look at that, it's a page, and it's going to actually have a bunch of stuff in here, which is not going to be great to look at in HTML. Let's be clear here. But it generated all this stuff. And before we get into looking at this mess over here, why don't we take a look at what it would look like if I was running this thing? So I can go over here in a command and go to cd td. Let's see if I get it right there. Yeah, okay, cool. So if I go to this, I think I'm in the right place. No, I need to go on one more level, I think. cd td, yeah. And now I can do, let me get my notes. I got to cheat here a little bit. I'm going to say doc, oh, sorry, that's in my notes. I'm on the wrong screen here. DocFX, and then I need to give it the name of this JSON file that I'm over here, this docfx.json file, which is just called docfx, but I guess you don't have to call it that if you don't want to. So I think I can just do this because I think I'm in the right place to say docfx.json, right?
Yeah.
And then I say serve, okay? And if I'm in the right place, I might get some errors here. When I was doing a demo, not a demo, I was doing a little run through of this before, and I got a whole bunch of weird warnings and stuff in here, like you're seeing there right now. But it didn't seem to matter. So there's probably something that's not perfect here. I've done this before at work. We use this a lot. I don't have this, but I was kind of throwing this demo together quickly. So let's not panic about that. You can see it continued. And there I get my nice little URL here at the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
And if I click this, now I'm serving it, right? So let's see, it's popping up here. And now you can see what just got generated, which is not a lot, okay? Because I didn't do a whole lot. But it has a table of contents, and it shows that there are probably articles and API documentation. API documentation is the code stuff I did. So let's click on that, and let's look on here. Now, there's a placeholder because there's more stuff it wants me to add. It wants me to write a little story like, oh, welcome to Andy's, DLL or library, and, it's great for doing a bunch of stuff. So it's sort of setting me up for that. Here's the name of the project, and here's the list
there's
of
class
classes,
one,
right?
Yeah.
An anemic class it may be, but look what we get. And I didn't do anything, really, but look what I got.
Yeah.
I got the inheritance structure. This is the kind of stuff you would see when you go to like traditional docs on .NET and things like that. Now we're going to make this a little better. So hang with me for a sec. But here's my methods. Here's my declaration. Here's the, this is the sort of bread and butter kind of stuff you want to generate. There's some other interesting stuff going on around here, including a nice filter over here, which now I only have one item in here, but I can say, oh, where is that class 1? And it'll highlight class 1. I guess if I say 2, it'll, like it won't work. So that's not quite searching. That's filtering this menu, right?
Okay.
It also creates what would you call it? An index, I guess you would call it, like to what this whole file is. So as this file gets longer and longer, this tells me what's in this article, this page right here. And right now, it generates automatically some links. As a matter of fact, you can see that methods gets a little link and do something. These don't. So it automatically sort of builds out a little thing. So you imagine this had like a big scroll on it. I would be able to click through and see a lot of stuff there. But let's take this another step forward and go back to my code here. And let's go. Oh, it always does this on the HTML file. So I don't know why, but I like to keep them closed. Okay. And let's take a look at this great thick class here. And a lot of times what people do is they do something like this.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to do these kind of, comment documentation things. But before we do that, you know what? This is kind of lame. So why don't we say we want to do int? I got an idea. Let's rename this whole thing. Let's say this is going to be called our calculator, just so this looks a little bit more like documentation, right? And we'll say this is not a great calculator. Let's not get carried away here. I'm going to say add, and I'm going to say int a, comma, int b. Whoa, my gosh. Andy doesn't code much anymore. If int b, right? And of course, what are we going to do? We're going to say return a plus b. This is not about the code, guys, right? So now let's put a little documentation on there, and it automatically the 3/ thing is great, and it sort of sets this thing up. And you can have rules on your library that say you must have documentation comments on anything that's public. There's a setting that we can do for that. That's not part of DocFX. That's part of Visual Studio, I guess, or .NET, I guess. So let's just say this great method adds to integers. Okay. And I'll say, this is not a whole lot I can say about this, right? The first int, the second int, and I'll say it returns a magically calculated value. Okay. And we're not going to get too much more carried away with that. Of course, I can put some stuff on here as well. A fully functioning calculator. Okay, great. So I'm going to build. Okay, it's going to do a whole bunch of stuff, and we'll see things probably moving over here if we really want to look at it. But let's not worry too much about that. My machine runs really slow when Skype is running. I hate to be bad mouthing Skype, but you see this build started. This is a nothing. This is nothing, and it seems to be. Wow, that's pretty bad. This is almost like waiting for that Docker Docker update to run.
Imagine if your calculator subtracted too.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. It's right. Yeah. Wouldn't that be something, right? Okay. Let's just kind of come back over here and reserve the thing, which again generally happens relatively quickly. Still slower, huh? That's kind of a bummer. But once we get down to this other thing, so what we're going to get now, we as we would expect, is something that's a little bit more interesting, and something that would probably be a little bit more helpful to you if you were coming along to use this great calculator class. And so I don't know. I'm just going to Control F5. I'm on that page. So that's kind of interesting, but notice it did change. I don't know. Maybe it caches that. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't delete that file because I renamed it. That might be a little, we'll take a look at the files that it generates. But now I've got my calculator class. Okay, calculator, fully functioning calculator. I come down to here, method add. This is a great method to add integers. I've got some descriptions over here, my parameters and things like that. And I can start to build out some stuff that's really going to help you, right? At the same time, I might let me just do one more thing. I'm going to try to do this kind of quickly, but let's just for sake of demo here, I'm going to copy this whole thing and cheat a little bit, make this a little bit more interesting, and I'll say subtract, and this great method subtract. Oh, look at that! You guys are letting me off the hook. Subtracts. So I wrote 2 integers. I mean, come on, guys. Who's paying attention to this here?
It does add to integers, though. Now, I'm not sure that you would say it subtracts 2 integers with that word 2, but it does add to them. So right, I just felt that you were doing great. I thought so.
Thank you. Thanks. That's great. All right. So I've got this here. But what I want to do now is go over to articles, and maybe I'm going to say something like, and this is probably not the place I would do this. I might want to add additional articles with a little more table of contents, but we don't have that much time. I don't want to get too far into it. So I'll say something like, welcome to the Calculator 2000, solving all your calculation needs. And I can put some, like as we were talking before, I can put more info, and I can say something like 1, 2, 3. I'm just generating a little markdown, right? So I'll have a little list there. I think if I did that right, we'll have a little more info. Okay, great. So I think I need to build it each time because I made changes to the class. I probably don't need to build it for this part of the documentation. That time it built super fast. Did you see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was interesting. Let's go back and hit the generation a little bit.
Andy, what's the name of that awesome extension you've got that shows us the Control Shift B?
Oh,
you've been using it a while.
That is called. Oh, I'm blanking out here. It's on the tip of my tongue. Karnak.
Yeah, Karnak. Okay.
Karnak. Yep.
Is that something?
Great. I'm also running in demo mode.
Oh, okay.
Studio, by the way.
Yeah, I haven't taken
so
a look at
everything's
that
a little
yet.
bigger, and my windows are a little bigger, and things like that. All right. So Gary, we did that. Let's just take a quick look. And so if I, refresh this, now I've got subtract and add and subtract. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that is because I wasn't sure if it was completely clear about what happens in here. Methods is actually, I don't know if I like the style here, but we can change the style. Methods is collapsed, right? And that's why we don't see it. It doesn't come everything expanded. But this is an H1, I think, and we could see this in the article if I wanted to do it. But I can expand it like, oh, what's in there? Oh, I want to jump right down to subtract. So this becomes pretty helpful in this article. And here's subtract, right? So now we saw that. Let's take a look at the articles. And then I'm going to show you one other cool feature. So over here in articles, this is welcome to the Calculator 2000. I did not do a lot here, but you can imagine that in addition to API documentation, I could build out a whole bunch of stuff into here. How to use this class, what references you might need to install, or something like that, right? What additional features, what's new, like all kinds of stuff could be in here. And of course, I would have a table of contents here and stuff here. I want to show one other thing.
Yeah.
And then we can get into better examples. But let's do something really cool here. You see this page, it says in this article, and it has a couple things here. Let's go back over here. And I don't usually do things in this order in a solution. I usually add things to source control, but I didn't yet. So what if I want to add this to source control? So I'm going to tell it to go into my Git repo.
Yeah, your GitHub account, yeah.
I'll make it public so people can take a look. I don't really care. Okay. And I'm going to create and push this thing. I'm doing this the simplest, quickest way, but this will actually go up to GitHub and put this in there. Now, imagine, because I'm not showing this right now, because we're seeing this happen right here in Visual Studio, right? Or not right here, but I'm running it from a command line on my machine. I can very easily, I just committed my code. I can very easily create a pipeline that takes this, right? Runs that docfx command to generate my new site up here if I wanted to. Okay, right? So now we have this site. So imagine a pipeline that when it does a build, it generates this folder called site. And then all I need to do is go to like a static site, static website in Azure, or even an app service in Azure, right? And copy this file, this folder with all its contents in there, into there, and it's hosted, right? Mm-hmm. And I have continuous integration and hosting. But there's a really important reason why I'm talking about this. So I might need to, now I just did that, and I'm going to build it again because I think there's a couple of little things that need to happen now that it knows it's in source control. And let's hope it works, because the last time it, for some reason, took a minute or two to actually, I don't know if it was trying to do something under the covers or something, but let's just see what happens if I serve this. And hopefully this is going to work.
What's cool while it's building is if this was your GitHub repo, we could probably do a whole show on organizing your source code and organizing your repositories and stuff. But we saw GitHub Pages earlier, and you could point that site folder to it, right? And say, yep, that's a website, and it would be a website ready to go.
Yeah, totally. But I want to show you something that happened here.
Yeah.
Here's my page that I wrote, and now it didn't show up. Did I miss it? I thought it showed up. Hang on. Control F5.
Yeah.
And what does it say now on the right? I've still got my table of contents, and things I changed. I didn't. That other sample had more H1s and stuff like that. This is, I think, an H2 that I created, so it shows up here. And look at this here.
Yeah.
Improve this doc.
Right.
This might look familiar to you guys.
Yep.
If you're used to working on the docs. And so if I click this, it's going to take me to GitHub, to this file, right? Where I can change this file. I can check in this file. I might want to have a pull request, process built into that, but it doesn't matter, right? I commit this file. Now remember, I said pretend I have a build happening here automatically. So I have a build and it deploys it. And every time, what happened? Let's see, I opened it. I didn't use I don't know why, but it doesn't do this open in a new tab here. So I just want to do that. So I would make my change over here. I would save it. It would build. It would push it out. And magically, this page would be updated right over here if this was the real served one, right? And it's not. This is my local host. And now I've got a full functioning API documentation with what they call articles. And I hope that all makes sense to you, this articles, that you can do whatever you want to do over here. And you can have this improve this doc, and you have table of contents. Oh, and there's another thing I didn't add. I can add search to this thing, like in one line. I can enable search on here that'll search across the whole thing. And what I just did recently at work is, we've talked at length about standards and best practices, and I have a document that's probably like 20 pages of a Word doc that I always save as a PDF and we post it. And I was never really happy with that at work. We have this 20-page, or maybe it's more than that, documentation. So I just extracted my Word document, converted it to Markdown, split it out into some extra pages, and put it in here in something that looks, very much like this, with some custom formatting, because you can change all this, like change the logo, change whatever you want. And now I have my enterprise documentation at work.
Yeah.
And it has an improve this doc button.
Right.
That will automatically generate, they can save it, and they can generate, and it will automatically generate a pull request that comes to me to approve it because I'm the enterprise architect. But boom, 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 up and running, and it's really slick. Let me just say that I'm really happy with this. What I have not done, though, is, and this is why I'm excited about this show, I've started using DocFX a few years ago. I don't know if it's the best thing out there. I'm not here to say that it is. I don't know what the alternatives are. I just know that this is working out pretty well.
Right.
That's my endorsement.
You know what I like about it is that, so you showed your code project, and again, it would be interesting maybe another time to talk about organization. Like, would you just, pros and cons of having this right inside your project, or maybe, I'm pretty sure.
I don't like it.
Well, I was going to ask you if you already knew that you could basically have it separated, and then can you point like compiled binaries at it or anything like that? I don't know.
Totally.
Okay.
Totally. You can do a lot of stuff with it. So in real thing, I did this the sort of quick way that I kind of wanted.
Right. Well, easy to follow though.
But normally,
yeah.
Normally, I take all this stuff, let's say site, everything except class, right? I think maybe my Git or a couple other things. And I usually have them outside of this in another folder called documentation.
Yeah.
This is dirty to a developer, I think, right? I don't like that.
But it was easy to follow. And what's really cool is it's almost like inviting you because of the simplicity of Markdown, and also that improved this doc. And if you go back to your GitHub repo, developers are familiar with source control repositories. It's like it's inviting you to submit a pull request, which I wouldn't be surprised if somebody already has, because like it's just asking, it's saying, hey, why don't you help me out here? And it would be obvious to me that somebody would submit a pull request to your repo and you'd have it ready to approve right now. Like, I wouldn't be shocked at all. That's not a hint or anything.
Except
that it is.
A pull request up here, right? Look at you. Okay, I see a pull request. I wasn't really noticing that. There's a pull request here.
Yeah, look at that. Isn't that great?
By Space Shot. Look at this. You know what? I wish I was. You were like, I wouldn't be surprised, and finally I'm like, oh, I see. Okay, so what do we got here? Chris said.
You might as well just merge it.
Have the continuous integration set up here. Sorry, it looks like you got. I can close this stuff. Sorry. So the commit is over here. What am I looking for?
You could click files changed and probably preview it, is what I'm guessing.
Look at that. So you came in and added this. No, you didn't do that. What did you do? Best contributions provided by Chris Gomez. And you put watch the Dev Talk Show in here. This is great, right? Yeah. So I would accept this pull request. This is funny, right? If I had CI and all that stuff built in, which I'm telling you, to an existing pipeline. Now I'm an Azure DevOps, and I can't speak to Git actions. In Azure DevOps, it's as simple as having a build step that runs the docfx command, right? It generates the folder as part of your build, and then on my publish step, it's like a copy files, task. And you copy the files and you put them wherever you want to put them. I mean, it's like 2 additional steps, like so simple.
Yeah.
And if we had that, we could have had a cool setup where Chris makes a change and we come over here and we're like, wow, look at that. This is Chris's comments. But,
Yeah.
we only have
More,
so many.
more seriously, though,
talk.
more seriously, like writing documentation for the code you're working on, like if you go back several years in your career, it just didn't happen. You just didn't do it. And what's kind of neat about this is that we've had in .NET the triple slash comments for quite a long time. But what this does is it takes advantage of it. You get to keep this like truth about your site, both the code and its documentation, in the code files. So you don't have to worry about, well, updated it here, but have you updated it there? Are we keeping it in sync? You're getting a lot of benefit. And it's not just for C#, because you pointed out when you showed us the DocFX website, there's other .NET languages and other languages like Python was in there. TypeScript, I think, was in there. I don't remember what else, but it's more than just, I like this spin on a static site generator where, yes, you could run your articles and your help and stuff, but there's more. There's, hey, we've got this extra purpose to produce your documentation from source code. And I just think that's pretty cool.
What's that there? Some weird little something going on there. I am not positive. I'm gonna say something that could be completely untrue. But if I remember correctly, this stuff was DocFX before other stuff. Like I don't know if maybe the Markdown stuff came second. Maybe it's been doing. I was trying to look at the history because Markdown. I mean, how old is Markdown? Like,
I don't remember. I suppose we could go do
that old.
Yeah,
right. Like, but, let's say, is Markdown 10 years old? I don't think so, right? But I feel like DocFX was around like for a while, but I couldn't find it, and I don't want to say, I don't know where we would find that out. But I think, like, my point is, I think it was around before static site generation stuff was such a thing, like, matter of fact, DocFX has, let's see, am I zoomed in here? I want to reset that. There's other stuff you can do in here. And if you go to so what do you think their documentation uses? Of course, right? Their documentation is DocFX. Where did I see it before? There was something I didn't know about. Somewhere in here, you can change the template, by the way, which is a little tricky. Somewhere in here, I was looking and I saw, I can also take all this stuff and just generate a PDF if that's what I want to do. I don't have to host it. I can make it a PDF and email it to you, and you've got the docs, right?
Yeah.
So it's got some more stuff. Well,
like it says there, build your own type of documentation with a custom plugin. So yeah, you can stream it out to whatever kind of a format you want. So I like this. I mean, I'm a big fan of Markdown for content. And then to see, hey, combine that with the source code you're writing and the comments you're putting in your code, and I'm getting pretty good first-class documentation without a ton of effort that's, more importantly, stays synchronized.
Yeah. So just while you're doing this, I went into my DocFX JSON and I added this global metadata. I don't know why it's not in here to start with. This thing just empty, but it's not. And I added this enable search equals true. And again, it's not going to be an amazing demo because I don't have a whole lot of documentation here. Let's be clear. But when I do that, give it a sec. And while we're waiting for that to go, I want to tell you another thing that I did. You can customize the look of this thing. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. It's a little tricky to customize. Like, it took a little practice. But one of the things I didn't like about this part, like, I can customize my articles, but what I didn't like, I don't want this stuff at the beginning. The inheritance model, I know that the other developers that are using my my class calculator here. They don't really care about that. I'm sorry. What they really want to see are the public methods, right? So you can rearrange this in the template and say, you know what, move the methods to the top. And don't show me inherited members at all because no one cares, but move the inheritance model to the bottom. You can rearrange that stuff if you want. Okay, I'm going to control F5 because the thing is done. And now I've got search up here. By adding that one attribute, I don't know why it's not enabled by default, if I'm being honest, but let's go to, I don't even know if I go to the root and you can't search from there. That's interesting. Wait, I know why. I think you can. I think I needed to hit Control F5. Okay, and if I search for subtract, it says, if you look in class calculator, now of course this isn't the easiest thing to render a preview of, because this is the messy place where the word subtract is, but I can go to it, and it's going to take me to where subtract was, and it shows it highlighted. Oh, and I didn't spell it right. Did I spell it wrong in the search as well? That was kind of funny. And I'm trying to think of what we have in the article. I think introductions. I'll go back to the root just so we know we're not on the page, and I'll say search for introductions, and there it says add your introduction. So we're getting global search across this whole thing. And you can imagine that if subtract was listed on 15 different pages, you would see them all listed, here and stuff like that. So, you add another feature like that, and it's getting pretty rich. It's getting pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all I have on this topic really right now. I mean, there's a couple other things I could show if we really want to get into it, but with how to customize the templates and stuff like that. But I'd kind of like to see what some of the other stuff, because Rich was kind enough to throw it over to me. I talked for a while, and I don't know what the status of stuff he's working on is.
Oh, it's all blowing up, of course.
Seriously?
Oh, really? So
demo gods are at it.
Let me just write this real quick. One sec.
So Chris, I'm going to throw out a question to you. One of the reasons you were an advocate of doing this show is because you actually said, I kind of want to learn this. I have some needs here. Are you thinking like, that could work for the things I need?
So in the past, I have been on a team that's used DocFX. And I didn't set it up though. So, I benefited from it, but I didn't set it up. Somebody had it, they'd figured out, they'd already done all the CI/CD and everything, and it was all internal. So basically you would just work, you'd write code, if you documented it well using the / stuff, and then you committed it, then as part of the commit, it would build the site and it would update the site. And that was pretty cool. Now, static site generators go beyond that. For example, I think what you see with Jekyll, which I think it's probably fair to say that Jekyll was designed maybe with a blog in mind. It's not the only use case for it. I think it's a good use case for heavy content where the layout is pretty static, right? I mean, a blog, one post to the next kind of looks the same. I might have some standard widgets sitting around it, like a Twitter widget that shows my latest tweets, or a calendar that shows, it depends on what your blog is about. Calendar that shows your upcoming meetings or something. But the content's what I want to concentrate on. And, I used to have a blog, and it's been down for a little while. And I'm thinking about getting back on with that. And my blog was so old that I was using a blogging platform called Blog Engine, and it was cool, except that, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, my content was being saved somewhere, and then rendering was happening every time. And after a while, it's like, man, I don't really need all that. I just needed to I just needed to render some content out into files and then put those files up, and it's done. Like, that's all I need. So I have been poking around at some static site generators, and maybe my blog will make a comeback. We'll see.
Hey, I just want to take a break. As I looked over at some comments, because I was talking for a while, and I was hoping you guys were, if there was something, critical, a question about what I was doing, but not a question, but Beyond Here Lies Nothing was saying hey, and saying it's the Philly.net crew. Yeah, some of us are, this is not Philly.net, but yeah, we're all big fans of Philly.net. I'm wondering a little bit what's going on with that group. Kind of hoping to hear some news soon, on that front. But we're here because we started this thing to sort of keep the Philly.net meetings going. This was supposed to be the virtual parking lot conversation, right? And Chris always calls it that. We always love the after conversations, and we wanted to have more of those conversations and include more people and just put it out there. So we started doing this, and then Philly.net is, I guess, in some kind of limbo these days. I haven't seen much from Bill lately. I know he did a few virtual meetings, but this might be what's left of it, of our. So hope tell the rest of the Philly.net people that come over here and hang out with us. And we always would right after the Philly.net meetings, we would go over to the studio we had right there in Malvern, right? And we would just walk in there and start broadcasting right after the meetings and stuff. We love all our friends from Philly.net, and from all the user groups that we've all been a part of. And we're just trying to keep the content going. So thanks for being here tonight.
I think Rich is getting set up too. But I think to your point, Andy, some people are watching us on YouTube, maybe in the future, which means you didn't watch us live on Twitch Wednesdays 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern time. But that's okay. You could be watching us on YouTube live at the same time. And but if you are watching in the future, leave us a comment. Tell us what you think about the content, about static site generators. Which ones are your favorite? What are you using? Do you got any tips for us? And if you like the video, hit the thumbs up and hit the red subscribe button, and you'll know when new videos are available. But if you're on Twitch, hit the follow button and you will know when we go live. And same thing if you're on YouTube, because if you've subscribed to the channel, we go live on both platforms. You can watch us on YouTube, watch us on Twitch. We monitor the comments from both, and we try to respond to them. And even we'll get comments up on the screen too. So
yeah, we have a good time, don't we?
Always.
Rich is sharing. Oh, cool. Why are you laughing?
Because you sounded surprised.
No, there's a delay. I had a black screen. I was about to say Rich is sharing, and I go, Rich is, and I'm looking at it, it's black, and I'm like, he's not sharing, and then you are. So I'm glad that you're back.
Yeah, we hear Rich, but he may not be hearing us at the moment. But we do hear him.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, now we're going to tell him, right? We're going to tell him in chat.
Yep. Yeah. Back channels. Oh, the technical difficulties, the challenges.
The thing about it is, I think.
Oh, he said he lost Skype.
Except I think he's still sharing.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
That might be frozen. Oh, he's back.
I'm back.
It was so easy when we used to walk into the room in Malvern, and there was a bunch of people sitting there in front of us, right, who could say hi, and that was fun and things like that, right? And all we had to do was hook up to the projector. Now, I remember in the earlier days, in particular, in the MTC, in the big room, not the MT, what do we call the big room? What do you call the all
NPR's
room or something? Yeah, sorry, thank you. Yeah, the NPR. The NPR we would in the older days, we used to have a lot of troubles connecting to the projectors. Remember that? And why isn't it working? And the screens wouldn't go down, things like that. But it was still less complicated than the magic acts and hoops we got to jump through get this out to those of you that are watching. But the other advantage is that you can be sitting on your couch watching us. You could be sitting anywhere in the world. We have viewers from all over, and so pros and cons. But we do have those technical glitches sometimes.
Yeah, and now we know that if it starts off, typically every other or most of the shows, we don't hear Andy's audio at the beginning. He's got to fiddle around with some things. All of a sudden, we hear Andy's audio. Tonight, he sat down. We heard him right off the bat. No changes. Everything was great. And I immediately thought something else is going to break. So
yeah.
He did. He said it right there.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that. Yeah.
You need
chaos.
somewhere.
There's always going to be something. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to go back to where we were before we went over to Andy and looked at the great demo he did around DocFX and show where we are now in our Jekyll implementation. So all I've done is I got that container finally to run. And if you remember back to the original repository, we had a docs folder here. I ran a command that basically said Jekyll new. And what that does is that creates a new site for you inside of the repository. And I told it to do it inside of the docs folder. Because if you'll see when we go back to GitHub, you can go to against the root or you can go against the docs folder. So a bit of a convention there. And what it did is it gave me all of this essential support to build out my site, right? I've got a git ignore here for files I can ignore. It gave me a 404 file. It gave me an about file for Markdown and an index file. Index is kind of important, as I found out, because that's the, if you don't specify any file name, that's where it's going to take you by convention. So this index Markdown is really important in that it has the basic information. Now, it's using some layouts behind the scenes. I won't get, and there's a way for you to bring your own layouts into this as well. So create your own structure of files to inherit from. Think of almost them as a template file that I use to build out my information. Not going to go into that here, but realize you'll see when we get this page, this index really doesn't show much, but it will show much more when we actually get in there because there are layouts behind the scene. This is Ruby, so Ruby, it has a gem file. I'm new to, I haven't done much Ruby. I wish Meg was here because she would be able to. I think she does a lot of Ruby, if I'm not mistaken. But basically, this is think of this as the definition around what to include for your page or where the code that runs for your page, essentially. And then in here, it gave us a posts subfolder. Now, it didn't give us another one, which I'm going to create real quick, which is a drafts folder. So I could have a place where I basically take and create a new file and use that as a draft. As think about a blog, we might have some way of starting to build content out. And then at some point, you would want to go ahead and post that. Right now, I haven't seen anything other than to manually move those from one folder to another. But we talked about, this is all residing in GitHub.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
That time he did freeze.
Did I lose Skype? You
No,
guys still there?
I hear Andy. Do you hear me?
Hello?
Yeah, I hear Andy.
I'm still here.
Okay, Rich is coming back.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I hear Rich.
I hear Andy just fine.
Uh-oh.
Yep. So,
Where are we?
Okay. I don't know. Did we lose Rich's
seem to be
audio
back.
or did I lose Rich's?
So for me, I saw like a freeze on the camera, but now it looks fine.
Yeah.
Got
I think
me
we're
now?
totally-
Yeah.
Okay, I'm moving. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's let this over the finish line here and show what this looks like, right? So inside of we talked about doing all of this, and the reason for doing that is so that you could see the changes and do things locally on your machine here without having to do multiple pushes up into GitHub and push them into the repository and have that engine run. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to run a file called bundle. Bundle is the engine that will basically kick off this component. It's going to call the Jekyll and run it in server mode. So essentially a local Jekyll server running inside of the container, because that's where all of this resides.
Yeah.
I'm going to open that up in the browser.
Interesting. It's interesting how what did I do? I ran docfx and the JSON file, and I said -- serve.
Right.
You're doing it. You're saying server. We had, I talked about templates. You talked about templates. My point I'm trying to make here is that, a lot of these frameworks really are very similar, right?
Yeah. It's just,
and so it gives us options to say, like, we have a lot of these same features, but yet you choose the one that works best for whatever situation you have, right? And there's just pros and cons to all of them, but still a lot of similarities, wouldn't, right?
absolutely. And it's, if you think, I tried, Goofy made the comment, early on, between Hugo and Jekyll, it's like they have pros and cons for each of them. You choose the one that makes sense for you.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So this is it. Here it is.
Well, this is it. So this is just a page. In this, we're looking at the post. So the template is basically looking at the posts folder and saying, well, give me all of the posts that are sitting in there, and basically do an array of this, right? If we go ahead and do, inspect page, you're going to go ahead and see, well, it's just an HTML UL, right, with a list, just like you would typically wire it up from an HTML perspective. But I can click into this and see this. This is, since we're talking about the show, this is the one that I quickly threw together while Andy was talking, and it's got static site generation as the title. Here's the date. My name's up there because I wrote this, but I could also do something like this where I include the video. And
nice.
This actually takes us out to where we are in the video, right? Now that information is templated. If I go back to my file.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. I saw you had that stuff with, those are like that page.title. Is that what you're talking? How does that get in there?
Right. So those are all added by whoever creates the page. So this is saying use the layout post. So you would manually go ahead and generate those, but it gives you the ability to use them elsewhere throughout your page. I think this is called a front matter, because you put it at the beginning, you wrap it in a couple 3 dash at the beginning and the end, and now it's available anywhere else. So you see on the page, even though it had static site generation and it had static site generation there, again, this is why it was done again, because I actually threw it into my version of the page as opposed to letting the template provide that for me.
Can I ask a question? That what'd you call it, front or whatever, these variables, we'll call them, right?
Yep.
Is that something that Jekyll's doing, or is that Markdown? Because
that's a Jekyll thing. That's a Jekyll thing. It's using, I think it's called Liquid.
Liquid it's using a templating language called Liquid, right? I think that's
I've
true.
Seen that referenced in other places recently, Liquid.
Yeah.
So this is, again, anything that's in here. Now, it doesn't, you can obviously create your own, right? And that was what I was trying to show with this. We have this one here. It doesn't know what a YouTube URL is, right? It just knows that I've got a key value pair inside of my front matter, and I can then go ahead and refer to it anywhere else if I need to. Now, these are all page-related front matter variables. If you go into your config, we've got site-related variables. So if I wanted to include, on my page, the site email, I could do that as well. If we go over to what the page looks like in the rendering engine, over here, you can see that it also included some of the other things we put in there, like an email address, the description, the Twitter and the GitHub repos. So putting all of those links inside of a template, so I only have to put them in one place, and now I got them available to see anywhere. It's all wired up where things link and work, so I can go back to the home page, and I can do something here, which we talked about for a while. How do we do this anymore? Oh, feed, wait. XML. There we go. So we actually get an XML.
Look at that.
Our posts.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I'm back. Sorry, that was a local one. That was
So you got out of that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and so I think if you dig into the themes, right, you can find, and you know what, this is totally unfair because it's gonna make it sound like but I think that what you can do. Oh, look, I have a mistake in the page. I think what you can do is there's like some very basic loop control and branching, and that's basically how you got it. Well, maybe not you, or maybe the theme. Maybe you did it. It doesn't really matter. how you get it so that it lists the posts in the post folder.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull that up real quick. There we go. So this right here gives you the ability to say for every post in the site.post, so whatever's sitting inside of that posts folder.
Oh yeah, look at that.
And then go ahead and throw that into there. Now,
right.
You could do the same thing for tags. You think about a blog engine, you typically would tag your page with certain words. In this case, if we say tag it with this, it's one tag versus tags front matter, and then that would basically say, well, every word in there becomes an array. Every word in there is is part of it, and you might do that because you're classifying your blog or your entry, your post, potentially with multiple tags. And the same thing, you can iterate over those and include that on your front page as well for your landing area, your blog, so people can search for the content they're interested in, essentially. And you can there's also categories that you can include here too. So lots of information that you can include in this front matter area that you can then use to make the experience much more rich and robust.
Yeah, like my feeling was looking at the two things we looked at tonight, like DocFX. Like, look, you can make any kind of content site out of either platform, but DocFX clearly, like, its DNA is about documentation for your software that you're building.
Yep.
And the DNA of Jekyll, to me, feels really like a blog or news site.
Yes.
And
yes, I definitely agree.
I mean, could you make other sites? Of course you could.
Yeah, right. I did just check, by the way. I was really interested while you were doing that. I was Googling, and it does seem like you can get Liquid running. Like, there's samples right on the page. I didn't even realize this on the .NET. On the DocFX page for Liquid. So
yeah,
looks like it can take advantage of some of these features as well.
Nice.
One of the things I wanted to ask you guys. I have an idea of what the answer might be, but we talk about static content on blogs or documentation content, right? But not all of a blog is static, right? Because you have comments and things like that, right?
Right.
So I have a guess at how we would handle some of that, but do you guys have thoughts on how we would handle the part that isn't so static?
Yeah.
I'm guessing there are commenting engines, and we probably have to incorporate one of those into there, right?
So I think
that's what I was thinking, like a service that like feeds the comments in, so that the site is static, but the comments are dynamic below, or something like that, right?
Yep. Chris, I don't know if you had something.
Yeah. So I think let's just pick up a popular comment discussion engine like Disqus, right? Which I forget how you spell it, like DISQUS or something. And they didn't know I was going to talk about them. Not sponsored, right? But if I recall correctly, using Disqus is as simple as registering the site that you want them to honor, like, because you don't want them just posting your content wherever, and then going to your site and putting in a little bit of script. Well, you put that script into your Jekyll template or your DocFX template, and I want to make it sound like, oh, it's that easy, and boom, you've got comments, right?
Yeah.
I believe in both of these platforms and other popular ones. There's a community creating widgets. Like, I'm pretty sure you can get a widget for Jekyll, and maybe it's not even a Jekyll widget, to be fair. It could be like a Liquid templating widget or something that goes out and grabs, you give it a Twitter account and it grabs the latest tweets from that account, perhaps your account. So that, to me, I feel like you can add a little bit of dynamic content back to what you thought was going to be your stiff static page, and it makes it feel alive, right? So
well, yeah, those comments represent your community, so
yeah.
I'm gonna real quick show this part. So now that we did all that locally, we want to go ahead and push this up into GitHub and then be able to see it out there. So what I did was I made a little bit of changes and saying, well, by convention, we typically focus on the GH branches GH Pages branch. You can set it to any branch, but that's kind of the convention. And then we talked about having your information sitting inside of the docs folder, right? So it's going to look at that and create my site off of that. We also have, and we'll show that in a second, we've got a vanity URL. So as I push this, let's go over to here and do git push. And that's going to go ahead and take a few seconds to do. There you go. And then now what happens is, if I refresh the page, you're going to see it's ready to be published. It's going to go ahead and check and make sure this DNS entry that we have here for the vanity URL is done. That looks all good. Your site is ready to be published. If we do another refresh here, boom, it's published. And we can go ahead to, instead of just going to the devtalkshow.github.io, we can go to shows.thedevtalkshow.com and we can see our published page up here again with all the same content that we had, as well as the RSS feed. So it's using static engine generator to be able to test things and run things locally. Once you're confident in it, you can push it up there and have it only run essentially once to build out your page in that environment.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
I feel like I want to have like an explanation or something like that, or like a disclaimer, because it seemed like, and I'm trying to be careful on saying seemed like what you did took a long time, right? Because we had to like break away, but that's not what's supposed to happen.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you could recap, like, what are the steps to get this thing running, and how long did it take when you did it probably this afternoon without the demo gods cursing you or something like that?
Yeah, everything is, so what's great about that is everything that I didn't write a separate demo script or anything like that. Everything's all up here on the GitHub pages. So if we go to, once we do the get started, and we kind of did that beforehand around creating a Pages site, you can add a theme to it, do all of that there as well. But the stuff that was behind the scenes where you were doing your docx piece, Andy, was creating the site with Jekyll, where we basically did a pull of that repository, created the docs folder. I'll zoom in a little bit. Created the branch for GH Pages, and then ran this command here called Jekyll new dot. So basically take everything that we need to create a new site and put it inside of the docs folder, because that's where we're running this command. We did a little bit of uncommenting of something in the gem file because we want to push this eventually to GitHub Pages. So that's where we want to make sure that we've got that capability inside of that file. I did run into an issue in doing that with something called the tables. There's a certain tables application. Basically delete the gemlock file, and then when you do that, it goes, you do an update and it recreates it. That was the way around it. And then that's it. Do a bundle update and you're off and running. We put, in this case, they pushed it all back to the repository, but the step here, testing it locally, just basically do the install and then, wait a minute, where's the command?
The bundle.
Oh, here we go.
Exec Jekyll
bundle
serve.
Jekyll serve. Yep.
Yeah.
And then it gives you a local URL that you can hit.
Yeah.
And that's it. And what's cool is,
yeah.
The other side of this is, we have, where did it go? Where is our? There we go. We have our repo here, and because we did this all with the dev container, we go back to, because we haven't merged this back in yet, but we have essentially a way for, can I do this?
Oh, new code space on current branch.
What happened?
It looked like you were trying to create a code space.
It's a whole different thing.
That's not what you were trying to do? Okay.
Yeah, that was. I thought that it doesn't show the dev container in here, so I got to push that up. Okay. Ultimately, you would be able to run this, do everything I did in your own container.
Oh, yeah, right. Because the dev container. So you could open a code space and edit these files. Like, that's not. Yep. But the cool would be if you had a dev container.json that defined installing Jekyll so that the code space you bring up would have Jekyll right there, and you would say whatever that command was, Jekyll exec bundle serve. You would just do it right in code spaces.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I could tell you, I know you showed on the Jekyll page where that Jekyll page hasn't changed in like 10,000 years, right? Because I'm not kidding when I say it was about 4 or 5 years ago that I looked at this. And at the time, what I did is I just installed Ruby on Windows and I installed Jekyll, and it just worked. And why, you can get started with GitHub Pages and a Jekyll-based blog with no tooling whatsoever. But the reality is, you're not going to learn how to use the tooling just because. I mean, how would you? What are you going to do? Keep like pushing and waiting, push and wait. So getting something installed somewhere, whether it's locally on your box or something a little cooler, like, hey, let's get it in a Docker container so that I spin it up, spin it down, and I'm not adding more stuff to my machine, or I can host it anywhere I want. That's where you will start to explore a little bit and maybe learn a little bit about some of the stuff you showed, the templating and stuff like that, which it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, between the documentation that's here for the Jekyll pages and posts and layouts and themes as well. I mean, it was pretty straightforward to get them included inside of my inside of what I was working on. When I ran through the sample over the course of the weekend. But the other thing is, when I couldn't find stuff here, there were some, a couple quick searches, and we were able to basically pull back, what I was looking for quite easily. So it really was, even though we ran into the hiccup at the beginning, it really was quite simple to get this up and running as painlessly as possible.
Right. And if you have your own domain name registered, you even though by default the site is hosted on the internet at like the devtalkshow.github.io, we were able to map that on. That's supported by GitHub and GitHub Pages. They even supported HTTPS there, safe and secure.
Yeah, by default. Yeah.
And I can tell you that adding the record to your DNS was pretty straightforward, and it's documented in GitHub Pages. Mm-hmm. It's actually more straightforward than I remembered, because I thought it was going to be much more difficult. And then I went and said, well, let me go look at the docs. And I was like, oh, wow. So that's cool that our own URL. And if you're wondering, so that part of the URL, shows.thedevtalkshow.com, is pointing to a GitHub Pages site. And our regular website, thedevtalkshow.com, is pointing to something running an Azure App Service. So here we are using two different cloud-based services, but getting a homegrown look and feel. Right? Both complete with SSL. It all works. Everything's wonderful. Isn't it? And remember how hard this stuff was just not too many years ago? And now I feel like it's all hands off, and I'm not doing anything other than putting the settings in the right places.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, why should it have to be that?
Yeah, this is the part that should be easy, right?
Exactly. Why should we make it more difficult?
Yeah. So working on that site, right? Is that what's next? Because it's aged a little bit. We're very proud of our talk with Carl Franklin, and that's why it's still on the front. And it was so great to meet him in person. So I'll head talking with Carl Franklin, who had come to the Malvern MTC to talk about Blazor, and then we got to chat with him on the show afterwards. What an honor that was to sit down with somebody for whom, which if not for the groundwork that he and Carl Franklin and Rich Campbell have laid, we probably wouldn't be here. So
they gave us a pattern, that's for sure.
Yeah. Hey, that was cool.
Yeah,
that was fun. Thank you both for putting in all that kind of work and showing everybody about static site generators and how don't be afraid to get started. These are just two of them. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of other popular ones. There are plenty of other popular ones that might be in your favorite language. And this is not exhaustive, right? But we saw DocFX. works great for Andy and his C# work, but it also showed other languages on there. I saw F#, TypeScript, Java, JavaScript, Python, I think is what I saw on the homepage. Ruby, Jekyll is written in Ruby. Doesn't mean you have to know Ruby. I know there's a system called 11D that I think is written in Node, and then Hugo is famous for being in Go. So you get to work with what you like, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
cool.
Find the tool that suits your needs, but take advantage of the features that these things offer. Like we were saying, we said it in jest earlier, but like some of this stuff should be easy, right? And it's starting to get easier. There's always problems. I hate to say easy because people go like, well, I tried doing it and something went wrong. Yeah, we know that happens. Believe me. We know that happens. Things don't always just work so smoothly, right? My demo went quite well, right? I had 2 lines of code in my sample. It was like I kept it pretty simple, so who knows, right? But yeah, this was good, and we here we are with another show, and we appreciate the people that have been commenting and the people that have been hanging out with us. We love doing this show, and we love having people hanging out with us. It's a good time. I will say on that note, I'm getting a little tired.
Yeah.
10:40 here on East Coast US. It's been a long week of work for me this week. So some weeks are tougher than others. This has been a long one. So do we have any ideas? I don't remember if we talked about ideas for next week. I don't think we did.
No, not yet. I think so.
We got to plan a calendar. We need like an intern or something like that. Wouldn't that be cool if we had like an intern who could join the show, join the team? I'll tell you what, I will go out on a limb right now. If people are watching, and I haven't told the guys I'm going to do this, but I would give, if someone wants to help us, I would give them free subscription to the Dev Talk Show. Right? We could include a free membership. It's a value, right? Obviously, we don't have subscription fees for those of you who are like, what? Right, it's free. But no, I'm kidding. We need an intern that would just come up. We need someone to plan these shows for us, right? Like, we seem to be good at getting them done. If we could just decide on a topic. If someone else just said, hey, next week you guys are doing the following, we'd probably pull it off pretty well. It's the three of us go, what do you guys want to talk about, right? Right?
Yeah. Because a lot of our
usually when one of us suggests a topic, it happens at that point. We just go, yeah, all right, cool, let's do that, and we all do a little research and we're done.
Yep.
It's so hard thinking of stuff to do, and that intern could be our marketing expert too, who could remember to tweet about it, remember to set up the meetup.com page that we have, and add the show to it, because this week's show wasn't it, last week's show, I don't know if it was in it, right? We're not marketing guys, but we're having a good time with the show, and I think we're providing some, we get great feedback from people. I think we provide some value, so it's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, on that note, 8:30 p.m. next Wednesday, right here on Twitch and YouTube. Catch us on Twitter, The Dev Talk Show. Catch us on YouTube, youtube.com/The Dev Talk Show. And I think that'll do it. So if there's nothing else, then for my co-hosts, Rich Ross and Andy Schwam, thank you so much, both of you. It was great. I know it's a lot of work putting stuff together. Believe me, we all know, because we all do presentations. And it was fun. So everybody, hope you had a good time. And we will catch you next time on The Dev Talk Show.